The thing about having 12 eyes is that you think you've seen everything. Trust me when I say, I hadn't. My name is Vorthen, and I'm what the Galactic Council politely calls a senior cognitive liaison. What that actually means is I'm a professional mind reader, one of the best in 7 star systems. For 342 cycles, I've been poking around in the heads of every sentient species we've encountered. Mantid philosophers? Easy. Crystalloid mathematicians? Child's play. Even the blog colonies from Sector 9, who think in chemical signatures instead of words, those I could handle. Then humanity applied for council membership. Could have known something was wrong when my supervisor, a 4-armed Krell named Bostic, actually looked nervous during the briefing. Bostic doesn't get nervous. This is a being who once telepathically linked with a star whale during its mating call and came out humming show tunes. But there he was, his primary hands fidgeting with his data slate while his secondary hands kept adjusting his ceremonial sash. The humans are different, Bostic said, which is what people say right before everything goes sideways. Different how? I asked, already running through my mental checklist. Did they think in colors? Smells? Interpretive dance? We're not entirely sure. The preliminary scans came back, inconclusive. That should have been my first warning. In the history of the telepathic core, scans are never inconclusive. They're either readable or they're not. There's no middle ground. It's like saying someone is slightly pregnant, but I was confident. 3 centuries of experience. I'd won awards. There was a moon named after me in the Proxima system, though admittedly it's a very small moon and mostly made of frozen methane. Still. I thought I was ready. I was not ready. The human delegation arrived on a Tuesday, which the humans informed us was significant, though no one could explain why. There were 5 of them. The lead diplomat was a woman named Margaret Kowalski, who smiled with too many teeth and carried a briefcase that seemed unnecessarily large. Next to her stood a man called Roberto, their military attaché, who had shoulders roughly the width of a cargo transport. Behind them, a scientist named Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a cultural liaison named Kwame Okonkwo, and finally there, get this, comedian. Yes, they brought a comedian. His name was Danny Sullivan, and he spent the first 5 minutes of our meeting making jokes about probe-related alien encounters that made absolutely no sense. Right then, Margaret said, clasping her hands together in a gesture that all 12 of my eyes registered as threatening despite seeming friendly. Shall we begin this whole mind-melding business? We're very excited. Can't wait to have all our deepest thoughts examined by strangers. This will be fun. The sarcasm was so thick I could practically taste it, and I don't even have taste buds. The process is completely painless, I assured her, activating my neural interface crown. The device hummed to life, its sensors extending like delicate flowers toward the humans. I'll simply establish a light cognitive bridge, scan your surface thoughts, assess your species' compatibility with council standards, and we'll all be done in time for the ceremonial lunch. Nothing invasive. Think of it as a conversation. A conversation where one person reads all your private thoughts without permission? Danny the comedian piped up. Yeah, we have a word for that on Earth. It's called marriage. The other humans laughed. I didn't understand why that was funny, but their emotional resonance spiked with genuine amusement, which my sensors picked up easily enough. Good. Positive emotions made the scanning process much smoother. All right, Mr. Vorthen, Margaret said, sitting in the designated scanning chair. Do your worst. Or best. Do your whatever you do. I reached out with my consciousness, the way I'd done thousands of times before. Making contact with a new mind always feels a bit like touching a new texture. Each species has its own signature. Mantids feel like silk. Krells feel like warm stone. Blobs feel like, well, blob. Humans feel like grabbing a live electrical cable while simultaneously falling down a well filled with screaming, and also there's a circus happening at the bottom of the well and somehow someone is playing 3 different songs at the same time and none of them match. The first thing I encountered wasn't a thought. It was a song. Specifically, something called Never Gonna Give You Up by someone named Rick Astley, and it was playing on loop with the intensity of a supernova. Behind that was what appeared to be a mental argument Margaret was having with herself about whether she'd locked her front door before leaving Earth. Behind that was a detailed fantasy about punching the head of her homeowners association. Behind that was advanced mathematics. Behind that was a recipe for something called potato salad. Behind that was existential dread about climate change mixed with a sudden craving for chocolate mixed with a memory of her 3rd grade teacher mixed with lyrics from 17 other songs all playing simultaneously. And that was just the surface level. I tried to go deeper, which was my second mistake. Human minds, I learned, are built on a foundation of pure chaos held together by anxiety, coffee, and spite. They think in multiple tracks simultaneously. They can be contemplating the meaning of existence while also wondering if they left the stove on, while also composing a grocery list, while also reliving that embarrassing thing they said in 7th grade, while also planning their response to a conversation that hasn't happened yet, while also that damned song keeps playing. Is everything all right? Margaret asked, noticing that all 12 of my eyes had started twitching independently. Fine, I managed to croak, which was a lie. I was decidedly not fine. I was currently experiencing what Margaret's mind assured me was called a earworm, which despite the name has nothing to do with actual worms but is somehow worse, pushed deeper, thinking I could find some organized structure, some core consciousness I could latch onto and make sense of. This is when I discovered that humans run background processes. Constantly. Their brains never shut up, not even when they're sleeping. In fact, when they sleep it somehow gets worse. Margaret's subconscious was currently busy composing a strongly worded email to someone named Brad, designing a flying machine powered by hamsters, and replaying every social interaction she'd had in the past week to analyze them for signs that people secretly hated her. Just, give me a moment, I said, my voice coming out several octaves higher than normal. Take your time, Margaret said cheerfully, though her thoughts were now wondering if I was having some kind of seizure and whether human CPR would work on my species, and also she was still worried about that door. Tried a different approach, focusing on her immediate sensory inputs, grounding myself in the present moment. This worked for approximately 4 seconds before I realized that humans process information by immediately associating it with 17 other unrelated things. The chair she was sitting in reminded her of her grandmother's couch, which reminded her of childhood summers, which reminded her of mosquito bites, which reminded her of a documentary about malaria, which reminded her of Africa, which reminded her of that time she mispronounced the name of an African country in front of Kwame and felt embarrassed for 3 months. All of this happened in the span of a single breath. Mr. Vorthen? Roberto stepped forward, concerned. You're turning purple. Is purple normal for your species? Yellow, Bostic interjected nervously. He should be yellow. Purple is less good. I tried to withdraw from Margaret's mind, but here's the thing about human consciousness, it's sticky. Their thoughts grabbed onto mine like that metaphor their brains just supplied me with involving flypaper and bad decisions. Rick Astley, I whispered, my mental barriers crumbling. Why? Why is he never gonna give up? Give up what? What is he holding on to? Oh no, Dr. Tanaka said, adjusting her glasses. Did you get rickrolled? By Margaret's subconscious? It's a very catchy song, Margaret said defensively, though her surface thoughts were now deeply amused that she'd accidentally weaponized an 80s pop hit against an alien telepath. With the last of my strength, I severed the connection and slumped in my chair, panting. My assistant, a young Vreen named Plix, rushed forward with a neural stabilizer, but I waved him away. I need 5 minutes. Was it that bad? Bostic asked. I looked at him with all 12 eyes, several of which were now watering. She was thinking about 17 different things at once, and none of them were related, and all of them were important, and also there's a song, and it won't stop, and she's worried about a door. I probably locked it, Margaret offered helpfully. Try one of the others, Bostic suggested, which proved he understood nothing about what had just happened, but I was stubborn. And proud. And possibly concussed, but that's beside the point. Roberto sat down in the chair, cracking his knuckles in a way that made several of my eyes flinch. Let's do this, alien friend. My mind is an open book. It was not a book. It was more like a tactical manual written by someone having a panic attack while watching an action movie, while remembering every fight they'd ever been in, while planning 17 different escape routes from the current room, while cataloging every person present as either threat, neutral, or potential ally. I lasted 11 seconds in Roberto's head before I started screaming. Not out loud, mind you. Telepaths are professionals. I screamed internally, which just made Roberto's mind immediately try to figure out why I was screaming and whether he needed to protect everyone from me, and also he was suddenly craving pizza. When Plix finally pulled me out of the link, I was making a sound like a deflating balloon. 2 down. Danny the comedian announced cheerfully. Who's next? My money's on Yuki making him speak in tongues. He was not wrong, but we'll get to that later, because by this point, something had become very, very clear to everyone in the room. Humans were not compatible with standard telepathic scanning. Not because they were resistant to it. No, that would be too simple. They were incompatible because their minds operated on a frequency that could only be described as weapons-grade chaos. And I still had 3 more to scan. The medical team arrived 14 minutes later, which I'm told was actually quite fast considering I'd triggered what Bostic diplomatically called a cognitive emergency protocol. Less diplomatically, the station-wide announcement had used the phrase telepath down 3 times in increasing levels of panic. Dr. Threen, our chief medical officer who resembles a floating jellyfish with opinions, hovered over me with what I can only assume was concern. It's hard to tell with Threens. They communicate primarily through color shifts, and right now she was pulsing a worried magenta. How many fingers am I holding up? She asked, extending a tentacle. You don't have fingers. You have appendages. And there are 7. Also I can still hear singing. Make it stop. Please make it stop. The human song has embedded itself in his short-term memory, Threen announced to Bostic. This is unprecedented. Is he going to be okay? Margaret asked, and her concern seemed genuine, which somehow made it worse because now I felt guilty about being mentally destroyed by her thought processes. He'll recover, Threen said, though her color shifted to uncertain orange. Probably. We think. There's no real precedent for this. Right, Kwame stepped forward, his voice diplomatic and smooth. Perhaps we should postpone the remaining scans? Clearly there's been some kind of miscommunication about how this process works with humans. There's no miscommunication. I insisted, struggling to sit upright. My neural crown hung crooked on my head, sparking occasionally. I'm a professional. I've done this for 3 centuries. I can handle 3 more humans. This was a lie. This was such an obvious lie that even the humans could tell I was lying, and they can't read minds at all. Buddy, Danny said, crouching down to my eye level, which given that I have 12 eyes meant he had to keep moving his head around like he was watching a tennis match. I've seen that look before. That's the look of a man who has stared into the abyss and the abyss was thinking about lunch. Maybe take a break? Can't. Council regulations. Must complete initial scan of all delegation members before proceeding with membership evaluation. I grabbed my neural crown, straightened it with shaking hands, and gestured at the chair. Who's next? The humans exchanged glances, having one of those wordless conversations that species with social bonds tend to have. Finally, Dr. Tanaka sighed and sat down. Be gentle, she said. I've had a lot of coffee today. This should have been my 3rd warning. I established the link, already bracing myself for chaos. What I got was somehow worse because it was organized chaos. Dr. Tanaka's mind was running 12 different calculations simultaneously, each one branching into sub-equations, while also composing a research paper, while also mentally peer-reviewing someone else's research paper, while also worrying that she'd been too harsh in the peer review, while also redesigning the engine configuration of their ship, while also remembering she needed to call her mother, while also analyzing the chemical composition of the air in the station, while also wondering if anyone else noticed that Roberto had been standing in a tactically advantageous position this whole time, while also that song, why was that song still there? Margaret had somehow infected her with it through proximity, but wait, there's more. Because Dr. Tanaka, bless her caffeinated soul, was also running what appeared to be a complete environmental threat analysis, a backup personality matrix in case her primary consciousness failed for some reason, a archived library of every book she'd ever read with full text search capabilities, and 3 different contingency plans for if the station suddenly lost life support. Why? I gasped, still connected to her mind. Why are you thinking about so many things? Am I? Dr. Tanaka asked aloud, though I could also hear her thinking the same question internally while simultaneously solving a differential equation. This is just normal for me. Is it not normal for you? No. Most species think about 1, maybe 2 things at a time. You're running more concurrent processes than our station computer. Huh, she said, and I watched in real time as her mind added this information to approximately 47 different mental filing systems while also wondering if this made humans weird and whether being weird was good or bad, and also she definitely needed to call her mother. I pulled out of her head, panting. Coffee. You said you had coffee. How much coffee? 6 cups. Maybe 7? I lost count. That's not helping. Plick squeaked from the corner. Actually, Dr. Tanaka said thoughtfully, I'm probably easier to read when caffeinated. When I'm tired, things get really chaotic. The implications of this statement hit me like a cargo shuttle. You mean this is you organized? Well, yeah. I've got a major presentation next week, so I'm keeping things pretty streamlined right now. Streamlined. She called this streamlined. I've seen solar systems with less going on. 2 more, Bostic reminded me nervously. You can do 2 more, Vorthen. I believe in you. I did not believe in me, but professional pride is a terrible thing. Fine. Kwame. You're up. Kwame settled into the chair with the grace of someone who has sat in many uncomfortable chairs and made peace with it. I should warn you, I'm a cultural liaison. My job is to think about how other people think. It might get a bit meta. Meta. He said meta like it was a small thing. Like it was a footnote. I connected to Kwame's mind and immediately got trapped in a recursive loop of him thinking about how I was thinking about him thinking about me thinking about him. But that was just the surface. Beneath that, Kwame's consciousness was running constant social simulations. He was simultaneously modeling my emotional state, Bostic's stress levels, Margaret's amusement, Roberto's protective instincts, Dr. Tanaka's curiosity, and Danny's, whatever Danny was doing, all in real time. More than that, he was running predictive models. For every word spoken in the room, he was calculating 17 different ways the conversation could go, assigning probability weights to each outcome, and preparing appropriate responses for all of them. While also monitoring body language, vocal tone, micro-expressions, and environmental factors. While also thinking about a conversation he'd had 3 days ago and realizing in retrospect what the subtext had been. While also planning his evening meal. While also composing a mental essay about the philosophical implications of first contact. While also, and I cannot stress this enough, still thinking about how I was thinking about him. Stop. I shouted, breaking the connection. Stop thinking about thinking. Just think about one thing. One single thing. I'm not sure I can, Kwame said apologetically. That's kind of the whole thing with humans. We're always thinking about multiple things. It's how we process reality. Reality should not require this much processing. Maybe not for you, Roberto interjected. But we're persistence hunters. Our brains evolved to track prey for days, monitor our environment, coordinate with our pack, plan our route, and tell stories around the campfire all at the same time. Multitasking is kind of our whole deal. I stared at him with 6 of my eyes while the other 6 were trying to stop twitching. You're telling me that every human thinks like this? All the time? Pretty much, Margaret confirmed. Though some of us are better at focusing than others. You should try scanning someone with attention deficit disorder. That'd be fun. Nothing about this is fun, I moaned. This is a nightmare. I'm living in a nightmare. One more, Plix reminded me quietly. Just Danny left. I looked at the comedian, who waved cheerfully. Save the best for last, huh? I cannot possibly imagine how you could be worse than the others. Oh buddy, Danny grinned. That's adorable. He was right to find my naivety amusing. Danny's mind was chaos wrapped in jokes, wrapped in anxiety, wrapped in more jokes as a coping mechanism. Every single thought he had was immediately followed by his brain trying to make it funny, then analyzing whether it was actually funny, then worrying that he wasn't funny anymore, then making another joke about not being funny, then getting anxious about that joke. It was recursive comedy, an infinite loop of humor and self-doubt and observational analysis all happening at speeds that made Dr. Tanaka's caffeinated multitasking look calm by comparison. But worse, so much worse, was that Danny's brain was cataloging everything for material. Every interaction, every moment, every facial expression was being filed away as potential comedy fodder. He was running constant simulations of joke structures, testing different versions of punchlines, analyzing the room's energy, and preparing 17 different comedy bits based on the current situation, and underneath all of that, genuine existential terror about humanity's place in the cosmos mixed with wonder mixed with excitement mixed with imposter syndrome mixed with pride mixed with that same damn song because Margaret had infected all of them somehow. I was in his head for maybe 20 seconds before I started laughing. Not happy laughing. The kind of laughing that happens when your brain gives up and decides that nothing matters anymore because nothing makes sense. Is he okay? I heard someone ask from very far away. Define okay, someone else responded. I disconnected from Danny's mind, still laughing, tears streaming from 8 of my 12 eyes. You're all insane. Your entire species is beautifully, terrifyingly insane. Wow, Danny said. That's the nicest thing a telepath has ever said to me. How do you function? I asked, genuine curiosity mixing with my mental breakdown. How does any human function with that much happening in their head constantly? Honestly? Margaret shrugged. We don't know. We just kind of deal with it. Some better than others. We invented meditation and medication, Dr. Tanaka added helpfully. Those help sometimes. Sometimes, Roberto emphasized. Not always. I looked at Bostic, who had been watching this entire catastrophe unfold with growing horror. They're incompatible. Not because they're resistant to telepathy, but because they're too compatible. Their minds are too much. Too much what? Bostic asked. Everything. Too much everything. All at once. Forever. Threen floated closer, her color shifting to curious green. This is fascinating from a xenopsychology perspective. How has this species not driven itself extinct? We came close a few times, Kwame admitted. Climate change, nuclear weapons, that incident with the murder hornets. But we're persistent. It's kind of our thing. Persistent, I repeated, the word tasting strange in my mouth. You're persistent because your brains never stop working. You think about 17 things at once because you can't not think about them. You run constant background simulations because your survival depended on it. Pretty much, Margaret confirmed. Is that weird? Weird? I started laughing again, the sound slightly unhinged. Weird doesn't begin to cover it. You're magnificent. You're terrifying. You're the first species we've encountered that could probably give a telepath brain damage through sheer cognitive chaos alone. So, does that mean we fail the scan? Danny asked. Fail? Bostic stepped forward. No. This complicates things. How so? Roberto's posture shifted to alert, his mind probably running through those 17 escape routes again. The Council requires telepathic compatibility scans to ensure member species can be integrated into our communication networks, Bostic explained. But if scanning humans causes mental distress to our telepaths, that's a problem. We're really sorry about that, Margaret said, though her thoughts, which I could still somehow partially hear because the connection hadn't fully closed yet, were mostly amused. We didn't mean to break your telepath. You didn't break me, I protested weakly. I'm just recalibrating. He's broken, Plix whispered to Threen. Very broken, Threen agreed. What if we don't use telepaths? Dr. Tanaka suggested. Humans communicate just fine with verbal language and visual interfaces. We don't need the telepathic network. But that would make you second-class citizens in the Council, Bostic said. You'd be locked out of approximately 60% of all communication channels. We're used to being locked out of things, Kwame said diplomatically. We can work with verbal and visual only. It's how we've operated for millennia. Plus, Danny added, you guys clearly need to keep your telepaths away from us for their own safety. I'm pretty sure Vorthen here is going to need therapy after this. He was not wrong. I was absolutely going to need therapy. Possibly 3 therapists. Maybe a support group. There's another option, I said slowly, an idea forming through the lingering chaos in my mind. What if we train liaison telepaths? Specialists who work specifically with humans. It would require extensive preparation, mental shielding, probably some kind of pharmaceutical support, and definitely hazard pay. Hazard pay for talking to humans? Roberto raised an eyebrow. Have you met humans? I gestured at all of them wildly. Yes. Hazard pay. Extensive hazard pay. Bostic considered this, his forearms crossing in various combinations. That could work. We'd need to develop new protocols, safety measures, probably a completely new training program. It would take time. We've got time, Margaret said. We didn't expect council membership to happen overnight. Good, I said, because I'm going to need at least 3 months of recovery time before I even think about human minds again. And I'm requesting a full psychiatric evaluation. And someone needs to explain to me how to get this song out of my head. Which song? Danny asked innocently. You know which song? Oh, that song. Yeah, that's going to be stuck in there for a while. Sorry about that. Welcome to the human experience. The meeting adjourned shortly after, with Bostic promising to bring the situation to the council and the humans promising to submit written reports instead of requiring telepathic scans. As they filed out, I remained slumped in my chair, my neural crown still sparking occasionally, my mind still processing the absolute chaos I'd experienced. Hey, Margaret paused at the door. For what it's worth, you did great. Most beings would have given up after the first scan. I'm not sure if that makes me brave or stupid. With humans? Usually both. After they left, Plix brought me a neural stabilizer and a sedative. You're famous now, he said. First telepath to successfully scan multiple humans in one session and survive. Survive is a strong word. You're still conscious. That's more than the preliminary team managed. They tried scanning one human and all 3 telepaths simultaneously requested early retirement. I absorbed this information while the stabilizer hummed against my cranial ridge. Plix, make a note in my file. Under species compatibility, next to humans, right approach with extreme caution, multiple safety protocols required, and for the love of all that is coherent, bring earplugs for the mental noise. Earplugs won't help with telepathy. I know. But write it down anyway. Future telepaths deserve the warning. As I sat there, recovering from my encounter with human consciousness, I had to admit something grudging and reluctant. I respected them. Any species that could live with that much chaos happening in their heads every single moment of every single day and still manage to build starships, compose poetry, and maintain enough humor to bring a comedian to first contact negotiations? That was worthy of respect, terrifying respect, the kind of respect you have for a natural disaster that somehow learned to shake hands and tell jokes, and somewhere, in the back of my still recovering mind, that damned song continued playing. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, humans, I decided, were absolutely getting into the council. We just needed to make sure none of our telepaths died in the process. That seemed fair.